7 a.m., June 10th, 1912. Mary Peckham stands on her porch in Villisca, Iowa, watching the house next door. The curtains are drawn. Nothing moves. Inside that house, someone has spent the entire night doing things no one has ever been able to explain. By the end of this, you will know everything he did, except who he was. Before this is over, you'll learn what the killer did after everyone in the house was dead, because he didn't leave. You'll learn why, when the doors were finally opened, every mirror in the house was covered. And you'll hear about a confession, sworn in open court in front of a judge, that 2 separate juries refused to believe. None of it will tell you his name. It's been more than a century no one knows his name. Villisca, Iowa. In 1912, it's a town on its way up. 2,500 people, a busy rail line, brick storefronts, church socials. The kind of place where nobody locks their doors because nothing has ever happened here. Josiah Moore is one of the town's most successful businessmen. 43 years old, well-liked, runs his own farm equipment dealership. His wife Sarah keeps the family at the center of the Presbyterian Church. 4 children: Herman 11, Mary Catherine 10, Arthur 7, Paul 5. On the evening of June 9th, Sarah is running the church's Children's Day program. It ends at 9:30. On the walk home, Mary Catherine begs a favor. Can her friends stay the night? Lena and Ina Stillinger, sisters 11 and 8. They had planned to go back to their grandmother's. Instead, they follow the Moores home through the dark. By about 10 o'clock, 8 people are inside the house. The door is shut. The lights go out one by one. Somebody is watching them go out. The morning of June 10th starts like every other morning on that street, except next door at the Moore house. Nothing is happening. No smoke from the kitchen. No children in the yard. The chickens haven't been let out. Mary Peckham notices. It's 7 a.m., and the Moores are early risers. She goes to the door and knocks. Nothing. She tries the handle. Locked. The Moores never lock their door. Hold on to that locked door, because before this chapter is over, you'll understand it wasn't locked to keep anyone out. Peckham lets the chickens out herself and telephones Ross Moore, Josiah's brother. He arrives, knocks, shouts, and finally opens the door with his own key. Peckham waits on the porch. Inside, the parlor is dim. The air is wrong. Ross moves through the ground floor and pushes open the door of the downstairs guest bedroom. There are 2 girls in the bed. They are not asleep. He does not go further into the room. He backs out of the house and tells Peckham to call the law. City Peace Officer Hank Horton walks the house alone. The guest room downstairs, Lena and Ina Stillinger. Upstairs in the front bedroom, Josiah and Sarah. Down the hall in their beds, Herman, Mary Catherine, Arthur, Paul. 8 people, no survivors. Every one of them killed the same way in their sleep with an axe. The axe is still in the house. It belonged to Josiah. The killer took nothing. Not money, not jewelry. He used the family's own axe, and when he was done, he left it leaning in the guest room, wiped clean. Doctors put the time of death somewhere after midnight. Most accounts say between midnight and 2, some as late as 5. But the strangeness of Villisca isn't when he killed them, it's what he did in that house afterward. Because the evidence says he didn't run. He stayed. To understand what the killer did, start before the killing. Out in the barn behind the house, investigators found an imprint pressed into the hay. directly beside a knothole in the barn wall, a resting place shaped like a man. Through that knothole, you can see the back of the Moore house. Someone had lain there in the dark, watching the windows, waiting for the last lamp to go out. Some accounts go further. 2 cigarette butts reported in the attic of the house itself, as if he'd moved inside and waited there among the rafters while the family slept below. That detail is disputed today. The imprint in the barn is not. At some point in the small hours, he came inside. What happened next took minutes. What he did afterward took much longer, and it's the reason this case has never let anyone go. He found a lamp, removed its glass chimney, and turned the wick down low, a dim, portable ember of light. He set it at the foot of a bed. He went through the house and covered every mirror, cloths, garments, whatever was at hand, every reflective surface draped. No one knows why. Superstition, ritual, or something as simple and as terrible as not wanting to see himself. In the kitchen, a basin of bloody water. He had washed. Beside the axe, he left a slab of bacon, about 4 pounds of it, laid out deliberately. On the table, food that was never eaten. In a downstairs room, a fragment of a keychain no one in the family could identify. And the one detail that investigators could never explain at all, the one that broke every theory they built, is still coming. Only 1 of the 8 showed any sign of waking. Lena Stillinger, 11 years old, appeared to have tried to fight back. She was the only one. Then he adjusted the bedclothes, moved through the house one last time, went out, and locked the door behind him. That's what the locked door meant. Not a family shutting out the night. A killer closing up the house on his way out, calm enough to be tidy. By mid-morning, the scene was ruined. Word spread, and before the National Guard arrived at 10:30 to seal the house, dozens of townspeople had already walked through it, through every room, handling things, souvenir hunting, trampling whatever evidence there was. Whoever he was, the town itself helped erase him. The investigation would have to be built on theories instead, and the first theory pointed at the most powerful man in town. Because within days, a man hundreds of miles from Villisca began talking about the inside of that house, describing things that had never been printed in any newspaper. Hold that thought. First, the Feud. Frank F. Jones, state senator, Villisca's leading citizen, and for years, Josiah Moore's employer, until Josiah left Jones's store, set up his own dealership across town, and took the lucrative John Deere business with him. In a town of 2,500, that's not competition. That's war. There was talk, too, never proven, always whispered, that Josiah had been involved with a woman in the Jones family. Villisca chose sides. Enter the Burns Detective Agency and an investigator named James Wilkerson, who built the theory out loud. Jones didn't swing the axe. He paid for it. The man he allegedly paid was William Mansfield, a drifter with a reputation dark enough that people called him Insane Blackie. Wilkerson took it to a grand jury. Mansfield was arrested. And then the theory hit a wall of paper. Payroll records placing Mansfield at work, far away, when the Moores died. He was released. Jones was never charged and spent years suing the people who said his name. Dueling grand juries tore the town in half and produced nothing. The Feud theory didn't die. It just went cold, like everything in Villisca. But while the town was busy accusing its most powerful man, almost nobody was thinking about the strange little preacher who had been there that night. and who had left town on the earliest morning train, hours before the bodies were found. Reverend George Kelly, English-born, a traveling minister, small, odd, intense. On June 9th, he was in Villisca for the Children's Day service, the same service the Moore family attended the night they died. Between 5 and 6 the next morning, while the house next door still held its secret behind drawn curtains, Kelly was at the depot, boarding a westbound train out of town. For years afterward, he couldn't leave the case alone. He wrote letters to investigators, to families, to anyone connected to Villisca. Obsessive, rambling letters, circling the murders again and again. Investigators began to circle him back. In 1917, 5 years after the murders, George Kelly was arrested. And then he did the thing nobody expected. He confessed, in court, under oath. The traveling preacher said he had killed them all. And then it fell apart. Kelly recanted, said the confession had been pressed out of him after hours of interrogation. Jurors looked at the frail, unstable little man in front of them and couldn't put the axe in his hands. His first trial ended in a hung jury. At the second, he was acquitted, which leaves the question this whole case turns on. If the man who confessed didn't do it, then who does that leave? Because here is the detail that changes everything. Villisca wasn't the first house. Pull the map back. Stop looking at Villisca and look at the rail lines. September 1911, Colorado Springs, Colorado. A family murdered in their beds with an axe. October 1911, Ellsworth, Kansas. Same. June 1912, days before Villisca, Paola, Kansas. Same again. And a string of killings along the Southern Pacific line, telling the same story. Now look at the signatures. An axe taken from the victim's own property, a lamp, chimney removed, placed at the foot of a bed, mirrors and windows covered, a basin used to wash, houses standing within walking distance of the tracks. Cover the mirrors, dim the lamp, wash, walk away. Again and again, town after town along the railroads of the American Midwest. The exact ritual that Villisca's investigators thought was unique, because they had no way of knowing about the others. Nobody was connecting crimes across state lines in 1912. That's precisely what let him keep going. This is the strongest modern answer to Villisca. Not the feud, not the preacher. A transient. A man who rode into town on a freight line, watched a house, did what he did, and rode out before the county even knew what it was looking at. In 2017, the baseball statistician Bill James and researcher Rachel McCarthy James spent years connecting those crime scenes. And in their book, The Man from the Train, they gave the theory a name. Paul Muller, a German immigrant farmhand who had vanished years earlier after a strikingly similar family killing. Others point to a different man, Henry Lee Moore, no relation to the victims, who months after Villisca was convicted of murdering his own mother and grandmother with an axe. It has to be said plainly, none of this is proven. The case is unsolved. It will almost certainly stay unsolved. But if the theory is right, then the answer to Villisca was never in Villisca. No feud, no motive, no connection at all. He stepped off a train, and afterward he stepped back on. The house is still there, restored to how it looked in 1912. No electricity, no plumbing, the same rooms, the same staircase. It operates as a tourist attraction now. People pay to walk through it. Some pay to spend the night. More than a century later, this is what remains. 3 theories and 1 house. A business rival powerful enough to buy a murder. A preacher who confessed and was believed by no one. And a man with no name, no face, and no reason, who was never in the town story at all except for one night. 3 theories. 1 house. Who do you think walked out of it? This is the case of the Villisca axe murders. This is Dark Atlas.